I still remember the hum of the ceiling fan, that low, unbroken sound that filled my father's living room the day he vanished. It was August 10th, the kind of California heat that turns metal doorknobs into branding irons. The house smelled faintly of motor oil and old coffee, my father's scent. He'd gone out early that morning, said something about picking up parts for the lawnmower. That was 9 hours before I realized he hadn't come back. By sunset, the light coming through the blinds was orange and cruel. I called his phone again, straight to voicemail. His truck wasn't in the driveway, his wallet and keys gone, but the dog was pacing in circles, whining toward the door as if she could smell his trail. I told myself not to panic. He was 72, stubborn as hell, and sometimes he wandered off to the diner without telling anyone. Still, something felt wrong this time. The silence in that house felt thick, like the walls were holding their breath. When the streetlights came on, I drove around town, checked the gas station, the diner, the park bench where he liked to feed pigeons. Nothing. By midnight, I was calling the Riverton Police Department. They told me to come down and file a report. The station looked smaller than I remembered, a squat beige building sitting under buzzing floodlights. The lobby smelled of dust and stale coffee. 2 officers at the desk barely looked up when I came in. One of them, a heavy man with a grey mustache, slid a clipboard toward me. Name, address, relation to the missing person. His tone made it sound routine, like a package gone missing, not a human being. I filled it out, my handwriting jagged. They asked me to wait. I sat under a flickering fluorescent bulb for 20 minutes before a detective in a crisp white shirt appeared. His badge read, Detective Hayes. He smiled the way you smile at a child who's done something embarrassing. Daniel Rojas? Yes. You reported your father missing? Yes, sir. He left this morning and let's talk in my office. I followed him through a narrow hallway that smelled of bleach and tiredness. He led me into a small room with a metal table and 2 chairs. There was a camera in the corner. I noticed it right away. He gestured for me to sit. This is just to get a few details, he said, nothing formal. I didn't know then that this room 3 would swallow 17 hours of my life. He started easy. What time did your father leave? Did he have any health problems? Was he depressed? Did he ever talk about hurting himself? Then the questions started turning sideways. Were you too close? Yes. Ever argue? Sometimes, like anyone. When was the last argument? I told him about a week earlier, my father yelling because I forgot to pay the utility bill. He scribbled something in his notebook. His eyes flicked up at me with quiet calculation. Then came another Detective Miller, younger, clean-shaven, restless. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. They asked the same questions again, only sharper this time. Their voices started overlapping like a rehearsed rhythm. You live alone? Yeah. Any reason someone might want to hurt your father? No. You ever lose your temper with him? Of course not. They nodded, slow, pretending to understand. Hayes left the room. Miller stayed, tapping a pen on the table. You seem nervous, he said. I'm worried about my dad. He smiled thinly. We'll find him. But something in his tone made my stomach twist. Hours passed. I wasn't sure how many. The camera light blinked red in the corner. They took my phone. They brought in coffee that smelled like burnt paper. My body ached from the metal chair. I kept asking if there was any news, but they kept saying, we'll get to that. Then, sometime deep into the night, the air changed. Hayes came back, holding a folder. He dropped it on the table. Daniel, he said, we need you to be straight with us. I am. He opened the folder, slid a photograph toward me. A blurry shot of what looked like a wooded area. You recognize this place? No. He sighed, sat across from me. We found something near the river. We think it's your father. My heart stalled. What? He didn't look at me when he said it. It looks like a struggle. There's blood. We need to understand what happened. I froze. My mouth went dry. What are you talking about? My father's alive. Hayes's expression didn't change. Daniel, sometimes accidents happen, sometimes people get scared. Number. No, you're wrong. He slid another photo, this one darker, grainier. I couldn't even tell what it was, but he said, That's a body, Daniel. Something broke inside me. My throat closed up. No, that can't be him. You're lying. Miller leaned close. Why would we lie? I couldn't answer. My hands shook on the table. From that moment, the room became smaller, the air thicker. They told me they had evidence, fingerprints, fibers, a neighbor who heard shouting. All lies, but I didn't know that. My brain was unraveling under the weight of their certainty. I kept asking to call my sister. They said no. I asked for a lawyer. Hayes laughed, actually laughed. You're not under arrest, he said. You don't need one. Every time I said I didn't hurt my father, they nodded as if I'd said the opposite. Miller slammed his hands on the table once, shouting, "Tell us what you did." His voice cracked like thunder. The sound made me flinch so hard the chair screeched on the floor. Then silence again, long stretches of it, just the buzz of the fluorescent light and the ticking of the wall clock. By dawn I was shaking, my eyes burned. They hadn't given me water in hours. I could feel my mind slipping sideways like being half awake in a nightmare. They brought in a woman from behavioral analysis. She said her name was Dr. Lang. She sat gently across from me, pretending to be my ally. "Daniel," she whispered, "sometimes the truth is hard. Sometimes our minds block out terrible things." "I didn't do anything," I said. My voice didn't even sound like mine anymore. She smiled sadly. "If you tell the truth, you can finally rest." Rest. That word dug deep. I wanted rest more than anything. My thoughts were a fog of exhaustion and disbelief. She leaned closer. "They found your father's blood on your shoes." I looked down. My sneakers were clean, but my mind couldn't process that contradiction anymore. The logic was gone. My world was spinning around their words, 17 hours of this words, accusations, silence, shouting, pity. The same loop until I couldn't tell what was real. At one point, they took my dog, said she'd be put down if I didn't cooperate. I cried, I begged. They left the room, came back, kept going, over and over. And then, sometime around the 15th hour, I broke. I said, "Fine." I did it. The words didn't feel like mine. They came out because they wanted them to, because every cell in my body just wanted it to stop. Miller leaned forward, eyes wide. "Tell us how." And I did, or rather, I repeated what they'd been feeding me all night, that there was an argument, that I pushed him, that he fell. I remember staring at the wall, describing things I didn't believe, watching my reflection in the one-way mirror as tears slid down my face. They recorded every word. Hayes even patted my shoulder when it was over. "You did the right thing," he said. "You can rest now." Rest. That word again. They led me to another room. No windows, just a bench and a thin blanket. I fell asleep for maybe an hour, the kind of sleep that feels like falling through ice. When I woke up, the door was open. A uniformed officer was standing there, looking uneasy. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He said, "You're free to go." I didn't understand. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then mumbled, "Your father's alive. He just walked into the station. I thought he was joking." I laughed, a broken, hysterical sound, but the look on his face stopped me. My legs gave out. I hit the floor hard, my mind tearing between disbelief and relief so violently I couldn't even cry. My father, alive, 17 hours. All that pain, the terror, the confession, and he'd been alive the whole time. I remember whispering, "You told me he was dead." The officer just said, "It was a mistake." A mistake, that's what they called it. When I stepped outside the Fontana Police Department, the sunlight felt like an alien thing. Too bright. Too clean. It hit my skin like fire after 17 hours under fluorescent lights. My father was standing near the patrol cars, confused, his face tired but alive. The moment I saw him, my knees buckled. I fell against him, sobbing, unable to form words. He held me awkwardly, patting my back. "Danny, what happened?" I couldn't answer. I wanted to tell him everything about the lies, the voices, the way they broke me down piece by piece until I didn't recognize myself, but the words were buried under a mountain of shame. All I could whisper was, "I thought you were dead." He pulled back, his brow furrowed. "Dead? Who told you that?" And I realized then they hadn't told him a thing. He had no idea what they'd done to me. They didn't apologize. No one said a word. The detectives avoided eye contact, papers shuffled, doors closed. I was ushered out quietly, like a problem they were trying to hide. On the drive home, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every time I blinked, I saw flashes of room 3, the metal table, the ticking clock, the cold glare of Hayes's eyes. My father tried to talk, but his voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard their voices again. Tell us what you did. We found his body. Be honest, Daniel. Even the silence between their words came back to me, that awful, heavy silence that felt like being buried alive. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it was over, that the truth was enough to erase what happened. But the body doesn't forget fear. It keeps score. I couldn't eat, couldn't step outside without looking over my shoulder. The phone ringing made my chest tighten. I unplugged it. I taped over the red light on the smoke detector because it reminded me of the camera blinking in that room. My father tried to help, but I could see the guilt in his eyes. He blamed himself for going missing. He didn't understand that it wasn't his fault. He couldn't. I stopped answering friends, stopped showing up to work. My world shrank until all that existed was the memory of that interrogation, 17 hours compressed into a single, endless second that replayed over and over. Weeks passed before anyone from the department reached out. A man from Internal Affairs came by, clean suit, clipboard, polite voice. He said the department was reviewing procedures. He called what happened a miscommunication. A miscommunication. That word burned worse than the lie about my father's death. I asked him if he'd ever been locked in a room and told his father was dead. He didn't answer. He just wrote something down and said, "We'll be in touch." He never called back. Months later, I started therapy. The doctor said I had symptoms of acute stress disorder, maybe PTSD. She asked me to describe what happened in the interrogation room. At first, I couldn't. My throat tightened every time I tried. But eventually, the words came slow, halting, broken. I told her how they lied, how they said there was blood on my shoes, how they threatened my dog, how they made me believe I was a murderer. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. When I finished, she said something that stayed with me. Trauma doesn't care if the danger was real. Your body believes it was. And she was right. Even though I was innocent, my brain was convinced it had lived through a killing and a confession. The news never reported it back then. Nobody wanted to embarrass the department. But the story started spreading online. Quietly at first, someone leaked the interrogation footage. 17 hours of tape showing me breaking down, sobbing, whispering confessions that weren't mine. People who watched said it was like watching a man dissolve in real time. They were right. That footage was me unraveling, losing the last pieces of who I thought I was. 2 years later, I got a call from a civil rights attorney named Marcus Velez. He'd seen the footage. He said, "Daniel, this isn't just misconduct. This is psychological torture. We filed a lawsuit against the city of Riverton. It took years, depositions, statements, more endless rooms that smelled like old coffee and paperwork. Every time I had to tell the story again, it felt like reopening a wound that refused to close. The city's lawyers tried to minimize it. They said I was confused, emotional, that the detectives were following protocol. They said I'd voluntarily confessed. Voluntarily, as if any sane person would confess to killing someone who wasn't dead. But the evidence spoke louder than they could spin it. The footage, the timestamps, the recorded lies. In 2024, the city settled $900,000. People think money fixes things. It doesn't. It doesn't give back the parts of you that broke. It doesn't erase the sound of a detective's voice whispering, "We found his body." It doesn't make you trust the world again. When the check cleared, I sat in my apartment staring at the amount on the paper. 900,000. It might as well have been nothing. You can't buy sleep. You can't buy silence in your head. You can't buy back the version of yourself that walked into that station thinking the police were there to help. Sometimes I drive past the Riverton Police Department. I park across the street and just watch it. Room 3 is on the 2nd floor. I know exactly where it sits. I picture someone else sitting there now. Maybe another scared son, another person who came in thinking the system cared. I wonder if they still use the same clock, the same camera with the little red light that blinks when it's recording. I imagine that light blinking on me, even now, years later. Watching. My father died for real last winter, natural causes, peaceful. At his funeral, I stood over the casket and felt a strange kind of numbness, like I'd already grieved him years ago in that interrogation room. The priest talked about forgiveness, about letting go. I wanted to believe him, but forgiveness feels like something for people who slept soundly at night. I still wake up some nights gasping, convinced I'm back there. The smell of bleach, the scrape of the chair, the voice saying, "Be honest, Daniel." Sometimes I hear myself whispering the words they forced out of me. I did it. Those words still taste like poison. People online call me a survivor. I don't feel like one. Survivors escape something. I'm still there, still sitting under that buzzing light, still waiting for someone to tell me it's over. They say time heals. Maybe, but trauma doesn't move in straight lines. It circles back, over and over, whispering from the dark corners of your memory. If you're listening to this, you probably want an ending, a clean line, justice served, closure. But the truth is, there isn't one. There's just me, a man who went into a police station looking for help and came out someone else. A man who confessed to killing his own father while his father was still alive. 17 hours. That's all it took. Every time I think about room 3, I imagine the walls still echoing. Not just with my voice, but with every voice that's ever been broken in there. I used to think evil had to look like something: a gun, a knife, a face twisted with rage. But evil can wear a badge, it can sound calm, it can hand you a cup of coffee and tell you to just be honest. And the scariest part, you'll believe it. Because they don't need to beat you to break you. They just need to make you doubt yourself. Sometimes, late at night, I replay the moment the officer told me, "You're free to go." And I realize he was wrong. I walked out of that room, but I never really left. A part of me is still sitting there, under that cold white light, waiting for the door to open again. Because once they've made you confess to something you didn't do, once they've convinced you that you're a monster, you never stop wondering if maybe they were right. I got my settlement, I got my lawyer, I got the headlines that said, "City pays man after coerced confession." But none of that changes the truth. They killed something in me that day, and no amount of money can bring it back. 17 hours, one room, a lifetime of echoes. I'll never be the same again.